Okay, let's try that again. So hello, this is Nico Matsakis. Welcome to the March 21st CTCFT. Before we get started, just a couple brief things. As always, we're governed by the Rust Code of Conduct, which I will briefly summarize in this context as be polite and respectful, but you can read it for the full details. And these are our moderators, the members of the CTCFT team, and you can email the Rust mods if you have any concerns beyond that. In general, we usually stick to camera and audio muted if you're not talking, but if you'd like to speak, you can turn on the video as a kind of signal. And that's always kind of nice to have the people who are actively speaking having their video on. If you're not comfortable with that or you'd rather not speak, you can leave notes in the chat to join the queue. So I have a few announcements before we get into the meeting proper. One of the things we're trying to do is get more structured in the way that we pick topics for the CTCFT. And so what we plan to do is every meeting, like this one, we'll announce a theme for the next meeting, as well as the date and time. And then we're hoping that you all will submit talk ideas. So the idea is next meeting, April, the theme is going to be learning, which is a pretty big, broad theme. That's intentional. So you can interpret that in many ways. And if you have some thoughts of something that might be a nice fit for that, you can open an issue here on the CTCFT repo. And you see there's a custom template just waiting for you. My talk idea. Okay. And we will assemble a theme, or we'll assemble an agenda based on the ideas people suggest. I think we'll probably assemble it next week if we get enough ideas. So do it soon if you have one. But also, you can suggest themes for future months. And if you just have some talk ideas that don't fit, that's fine. You know, the remedy is the same no matter which of these things you'd like to suggest. Open an issue. You can always chat on the CTCFT stream on Zulip as well. So on that note, this is the next meeting. It's in a much later time slot than this one because it's the more Asia-friendly time slot. So here it is, the third Monday as ever, 9 p.m. my time. Here are some select other times, and the theme will be learning. All right, great. So, well, I guess any questions on that before I go forward? Hearing none. Okay. So here's the agenda for this meeting. It's got a pretty exciting lineup, especially the second half, in my opinion. So first, opening remarks, that's what you're hearing right now. Then Josh Triplett and I are going to talk some about the Lang team roadmap. And the part I'm excited about, we have Beck, the executive director of the Rust Foundation, Rebecca Rumble, who's going to present kind of an overview of what the Rust Foundation is up to this year. So with that, I guess from there, we'll lead right into the roadmap discussion. Any comments or things before I do that? Last chance. Okay, great. Now I just realized I don't have the slides set up, so let's do that. Pay no attention to what I'm doing right now. Okay, Josh, are you ready? You look good. Okay, so yeah, we have this. Josh Triplett and I, as well as other people on the Lang team, have been working on a kind of draft roadmap. You can see it here as well. That we would like to get some feedback on. The idea of this roadmap is to help define help focus ourselves. What are the things we're going to be paying attention to, guide the decisions that we make, but also to steer external contributors who would like to support Rust into areas where we would really like to see support, and to help us think kind of long-term, right? So we started out with a 2022 roadmap, but realized that at least it made sense to think about 2024 as kind of the next Rust edition. What are the things that most important for us to do to set ourselves up in a position that we're having a good story then about what we want. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the way that I at least have thinking about this. And, I think we all know Rust's mission is kind of empowering everyone to build reliable, efficient software. But you can go a little deeper and ask yourself sort of, for Rust, where is Rust the best choice? Right? We know it's not going to be the best choice everywhere. No one language could be that. So where will we endeavor at least to make Rust the best choice or one of the best choices? And I would say that, Rust's key area is environments where resource usage, security, those things, these are the top considerations, right? If those are your top considerations, Rust is hands down an excellent choice for that. I like to think of it as like a stitch in time saves 9. If that's your attitude, Rust is going to help you because we're going to bring a lot of concerns up front and make sure you address them well. On the other hand, if your attitude is like, I need to get this out the door as quickly as possible, I don't care if it has some bugs, maybe Rust isn't the right choice for you. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate way to feel about your code, right? And so I think we can see that we've had a lot of success with Rust in these areas where one of those three things is really important, right? Like network and cloud infrastructure, its reliability, its performance, those things are key. Embedded development is kind of getting access to these, controlling resources really tightly and having access to the full capabilities of the machine. Same with kernel. I think CLI applications have been pretty cool area for us, which is a little bit, maybe they don't quite fit into that framework, but I think they actually do. Like the reason that we've had so many great CLI applications, a lot of it is stuff like ripgrep or whatever that end up, even though you think a CLI application might be more like a toy, actually, right, people use them on huge directories with gigabytes and gigabytes of data. So often they have to scale and perform really well and be reliable against all kinds of nonsense. So that's really good. And I think Rust is doing really well in those areas where like we have a niche and we're doing really well in that niche. And it's a big one and an important one. So I'm happy with that. At the same time, it's good for us to think about, okay, we know we do well when resources or whatever are the most important, but what about when they're really important, but maybe not the most, right? Maybe time to market is like equally important or something. And how far down can we stretch? How much can we make it so that Rust is, how much can we broaden that range where Rust is a really good choice? And so we've been thinking about that, and we have these, we've been thinking about the need for Rust to kind of scale up essentially in different dimensions. And that's how we came to these three themes. So flattening the learning curve, this is sort of scaling out, continuing to push on the boundaries of, can we make Rust easier to use so that even if you don't care as much about reliability, you might still pick Rust, right? And we push that boundary out as far as we can go. And then the other one is really focusing on enablers for the ecosystem, because as Josh will talk more about, one of the things that we've seen is, in Rust, such a big part of our success comes about because we have so many great people building great libraries. And what can we do to make it possible in the language side, but I guess in the project overall, to make building libraries and maintaining them, even easier and even more powerful. And finally, we'll kind of never be able to do either of these things if we don't do a good job organizing our open source contributors and our organization and helping the Rust project itself scale up. So in a way, this is actually the most important, focusing on our parts of our process and other things where that turn people away so that they don't come and contribute, or just don't guide them as effectively towards the places where they can make an impact. So what we're going to do is, let me just, oops, I'm all lost. What's happening? I got confused. Oh, I somehow skipped some stuff. No wonder that seemed confusing. Okay, sorry about that. Let me jump back. I have to show you my ASCII art. There. This is my ASCII art of saying, we want to make sure at the same time we're serving existing users really well. That's kind of this angle, going from rough to polished. And I think we definitely have some rough areas where we need to get better. But we also want to be broadening out on this way as well to get as much area in this chart as possible. And this is what I wanted to get at, and I was missing. We believe, or at least I do, I think I speak for Josh here, that this roadmap is like a start for what a Rust-wide product roadmap would be, right? This is really from a Lang team perspective, and that's all we're speaking for right now. But I would like to know if we could bring more teams into this and fit the work that we would all like to prioritize, into this roadmap, or maybe add some additional themes or items so that it does fit. Because it would be great if we had a kind of Rust-wide product roadmap. And I would say also that, to achieve this goal of broadening this access or broadening that one is not just a Lang concern. It's going to take more than language changes. And in fact, language changes may not be the most highest impact in many cases, right? It may have more to do with tooling or compiler team robustness and things like that. Okay, so the last thing I'll say is this is kind of an initial roadmap. I think it's kind of a combination of what do we think we can do for 2024, but also what do we need to focus on the most right now? If we only got to do 1 year's worth of work, what would it be? So there we go. With no further ado, let me dive into those 3 themes that we talked about. So actually, I'm going to talk about the first theme, the learning curve, a little bit, and then Josh will pick up on the other 2 and close out. So the idea of the learning curve, we broke it down into 4 kind of more concrete items. And in the roadmap itself, there's lists of specific initiatives and things for each of these, and both things that are in progress and things that we would like to see happening. But I think these categories are kind of the 4 big groups that, at least of things that I'm thinking about right now. One is taking the analyses that we do and making them more precise, and just kind of lowering the rigmarole of writing Rust, right? So that might mean making Polonius more accurate, or sorry, making the borrow checker more accurate so that it accepts more code. It might mean things like implied bounds that we've been thinking about for a while, so you have to write fewer where clauses. Basically, places where there's redundancy in the system that's not actually helping us. Redundancy can be useful for reliability, but sometimes it's just kind of red tape. Trying to find those places and remove it and let the compiler figure out more stuff. The next section is kind of express yourself more easily. So here there's just parts of Rust. I think let else is a classic example of a really sort of small scale feature that could have a big impact, where you have to learn a certain workaround if you want to do this thing in Rust, right? It's totally doable, but you have to learn the way to do it. And that may mean you have to get some external crate. It may mean you have some pattern. And until you know that, you can often just kind of get stuck and not realize the trick for it. And so trying to find ways to either eliminate that trick or just directly express it so that it's more obvious can help Rust feel more productive and feel natural and easier to learn. Next thing would be async. I think this kind of overlaps with some of the others, but we've been working on async FN for a while. We have this async roadmap, and we went through this async vision doc process, and we need to support that and keep it moving. And finally, one of my pet peeves, at least, is working a lot on din trait, because I think din trait gets a lot of usage and it has a lot of rough edges. It hasn't really gotten a lot of love since it was first created. And there's a lot of just ergonomic challenges here, like there are things you can't do in traits that use dynamic dispatch that it would be nice if they worked, like by value self or taking impl trait parameters, and we can make them work. And then there's also kind of some soundness conditions to resolve, and just in general some work to do there. And I think that's going to be a focus area for us. So I'm going to skip past this slide because I kind of did it in-house. But here are some examples of things that are underway that fit this category. And I'll highlight the one I didn't mention explicitly so far. Din upcasting is an example of something we can make work better. So if you have a subtrait today, you can't easily convert it into a din of a super trait. We have an initiative mostly done that lets that work, and hopefully that'll stabilize soon. So if you're interested in hacking on that kind of stuff, you can check out the ongoing initiatives. If you have ideas, there's a Zulip stream, which Josh will give, which is in the slides later, where you can come in and bring up, kind of float new ideas in that vein. But at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Josh to talk about the other two themes.
Thanks, Nico. Am I audible?
You are.
Excellent. Okay, I'm Josh Triplett. I'm going to walk through the two remaining themes, helping users help each other, as well as helping the Rust project scale so that we can get any of these things done. So first of all, we've talked about Rust empowering people, and that's not just about our end users. It's a team effort in that a big part of what we do in the language is to help the standard library and the huge Rust library ecosystem on Crates.io and elsewhere to continue to be a great strength of the Rust language. And we want to scale that further. We want to empower the standard library authors as well as authors of libraries in the ecosystem much further, give them more tools to work with, give them more ways to help their users who are Rust's users. And in particular, we want to share some tools that we've previously only and exclusively made available to the Rustlang Rust ecosystem. We have a lot of things we've reserved for ourselves that I think that we could make more broadly available. So going on to the next slide, the main sub-themes of this are we want to help libraries develop through their feature lifecycle. We want to provide some richer abstractions that make it easier to express common patterns that happen in libraries. We want to provide better ways for libraries to tailor the developer experience, again, in ways that we've been able to do in Rust itself, but not typically in the library ecosystem. And then we want to improve several different aspects of interoperability, including portability, linking, cross-linking, compatibility, bridging and gluing things together, and so on. So starting with a few things we have underway, we want to, next slide, thank you. We want to make it easier to migrate things into the standard library or migrate things from experimental libraries into more foundational libraries in the ecosystem. And there is a proposal underway from Jane Lusby specifically to support disambiguation of methods on the basis of what Rust edition your crate comes from. This is something that typically the language has gotten huge mileage out of the edition system for allowing us to evolve the language without backwards compatibility issues by allowing you to opt into 3 years worth of language changes at a time. The library ecosystem and even the standard library have gotten very little success out of editions because we haven't made the facilities available to tie things to Rust editions. So we're wanting to fix that and make it so that we can add something to the standard library that is used from an incredibly widely used Rust crate without breaking all of the users of that widely used Rust crate. We want to make it so that a popular foundation framework can add things that an experimental crate showed were valuable without breaking the users of that experimental crate. We also want to improve our story for interoperability between crates. So right now we've built async await. We made that available. Many people built libraries and foundations and whole frameworks around this. And this is in and of itself part of the problem now, where higher level libraries trying to build on top of those now face a choice of, well, what do I build on? There's too many different possibilities. So we are looking to improve async portability, first of all, of pulling things into both the library and the language that will make it possible to write code that doesn't care what async runtime you run on or what frameworks you use. We're also looking at adding global or scoped capabilities, which will allow you to have code that needs an async runtime that can depend on the properties of some trait that provides an async runtime without having to pass that async runtime to every single function in your program, just so that you can call it in case you need it. So kind of an ambient capability mechanism for give me the current runtime, please. And then we want to improve some things in coherence, which I will get to in a little bit. But in general, we want to make it possible to glue libraries together in more interesting ways without being limited by the properties of the type system that make it difficult to extend crate A or crate B from outside of either crate A or crate B. So some future work that we would like to work on that does not yet have an owner, but we're very excited about nonetheless. The standard library has the ability to provide stability markers. This feature is stable. You can use it from stable Rust. This feature only works in nightly Rust. We want to give a similar facility to users of libraries in the ecosystem. You can mark your APIs as unstable, and people currently already do this using cargo feature flags. They might have an unstable this or unstable that feature flag, but this is non-standard. It's kind of custom done using features, which means it's not standardized in a way that we could add more tooling around. So for instance, you should have control at your top level crate or intermediate libraries about whether your dependencies are opting into nightly features of their dependencies so that you know you won't break with a new upgrade. Otherwise, you lose control over stability. You feel like you're using stable Rust, but you get a worse experience. So if we give control over, hey, okay, it's all right for this library that I'm using to opt into unstable code of a library it wants to use, and transitive unstable, that's something we can only do if we know at the language, library, and cargo level about these stability markers in a semantic way and not just a this is some feature way. We also want to give libraries the ability to tailor the developer experience with custom diagnostics, with lints, with tools to say, hey, here's how you're doing a common misuse of our API. This is a facility we have in the standard library all the time, but we don't have it in the library ecosystem. So we get complex error messages instead of much more straightforward ones that we could have. And then we want better tools for interoperability. Things like right now, if you want to glue crate A together with crate B, you need to be either part of crate A and depend on crate B or part of crate B and depend on crate A. That's not a process that scales well when there are too many different ways people might want to glue things together. And a database shouldn't need to depend on a random library just to make that library's types usable within the database select statements. That's the kind of thing where you should be able to have a third-party glue crate that puts the two of them together, but things like coherence in our type system don't let you do that. So all sorts of features we want to add there. Then, as Nico said, there's very little we're going to be able to get done if we cannot scale our ability to develop the Rust language. So going on to this next slide, yeah. We know,
I'm trying to get rid of this thing, but I don't know how, so I'll just leave it.
refresh, I think.
That might work. No, apparently not.
Apparently not. Okay. All right. So we want to help the Rust project scale within our team and provide processes that other teams may be able to adopt or adapt as they see fit. And part of the this is actually one slide too far ahead. Can you go back? Thank you. Part of the issue is that the Rust community is growing very rapidly, but for logistical reasons, teams don't grow at the same rate. You watch Rust communities grow faster than linearly. If we grew the teams at the same rate, we'd have hundreds of people on the team and we wouldn't actually be able to get anything done. So in practice, what we need to do is be able to do more and delegate more with the same people that we have and with growing and maintaining and curating the teams that we have, but not getting to a point where we can't work together and can't interoperate. So we need to be able to scale our development processes to manage the needs of many more users for approximately the same number of teams. And we also need to create more sub-teams, more working groups, empower more initiative owners, and in general, make it feasible for us to delegate more rather than doing all of the language work within one group. So going on to the next slide, our three big goals here are that we want to make it easier to see what we are doing and what other teams are and sub teams and working groups are doing at a glance. Figure out, hey, there's this particular work that I care deeply about that my software is going to depend on. It's currently nightly. When is it going to stabilize, or is it ever going to stabilize at all? How can I help? You should be able to see that very easily. We want to make sure that every initiative, every effort, every experiment has a clear owner, has regular communication. It's easy to figure out who you should talk to and who you should work with. And we're looking to build processes with better tooling support that make it easier to quickly experiment and similar. And going on to what I think is the last slide here. We have a number of things underway in this area. We have an initiative system that we've talked about before that we're very excited about. We have a project board linked here when we send out the slides. We're doing a regular backlog bonanza effort that allows us to get hold of our backlog and close out things that aren't ever going to stabilize and get other things on a track to actually stabilize. We're doing more work to stabilize and ship features that people are using, people are excited about, but had just stalled out. We have a whole new consensus process and tooling that we're using to augment and replace the RFC bot process that will help us improve the ability to quickly make decisions that can just as easily be reversed, things that aren't committing to stabilization for the foreseeable future, enable more experimentation, make it easier and lower friction for people to raise concerns and dissent. This is easily something we could give a whole talk on all on its own. And we're also starting a couple of new sub-teams. One of them, the types team, is helping to concentrate the expertise around deep type system and trait theory and how to put all of those together. Nico is driving a lot of that effort. And we're also reviving the old style team to help make sure that as we add new language features, how to format those in a standard way is something we check and scale and don't just leave by the wayside to catch up after we've shipped a feature. So summing it all up, we want to flatten the learning curve for new and experienced Rust users alike, make sure people don't bounce off and can get all the things they want to done. We want to make sure that the Rust library ecosystem and the standard library have all of the tools and foundations that they need to be able to scale and continue to be as awesome as they can be. And we want to help the Rust project itself and our team and sub-teams and working groups scale in ways that allow us to get any of these things done. And if you want to help us with any of these things, if you want to head up an item, if you see an item that you want to work on, or if you want to add to this list within these themes, then there is a Lang Roadmap 2024 Zulip stream, and you're also welcome to private message either Nico or myself on Zulip if you want to chat about these privately before starting a public discussion.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Josh. So I would love to take questions, but I also want to make sure we have enough time for Beck. So what I'm going to do is say, if you'd like to talk about this, and I totally want to hear what you have to say and any thoughts, especially on where other teams might fit in, or if there's something missing from this just for the Lang team. Let's talk about it in the social hour or on Zulip afterwards. But for now, I'd like to turn over to Beck and go from there. Beck, are you going to share anything, or do you just want to chat?
I can do. It depends if people want to sit and stare at a PowerPoint, yeah. I guess. I tell you what I will do, just very quickly.
It's mostly that I will have to give you permission. So let me do that.
In that case, don't worry. It's fine.
Well, I did it already. But all right, you do what you like. And I will turn off my video and hand it over to you.
Don't worry, I didn't put a big thing together anyway because I thought it'd be easier just to chat through. Okay, well, Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me along today. It was actually really, I found it really useful sitting in on the first half and hearing about your plans. One of the things that we're really interested in are the kind of roadmaps that the teams are putting together. So really useful to see what your priorities are. Obviously, I'm here to talk about the Rust Foundation and our kind of plans for 2022, what we think our work programs and our priorities should be, and what we've been doing. So I'll probably only talk for about 10 minutes or so at most, and obviously enable people to answer questions. So our key priorities, I think one of the most asked questions that I've had since I started from people is, well, what is the Rust Foundation? What's it for? And I think we're starting to get better at answering that, but I think we still have a little way to go. So one of our kind of key priorities is to actually develop the narrative around the foundation, around Rust. You know, Nico kind of said at the beginning here, I think everyone understands what kind of Rust is for, and what the kind of mission and vision is there. I think as the foundation, we need to kind of hone a little bit more what our role is in that. So figuring out kind of the narrative of what the foundation is going to do, how we are going to steward the Rust programming language, and how we work with other people to do that, and indeed where we think we're going with it as well. And again, a lot of the work
Seems like we lost Beck's connectivity. Hopefully she'll be back. I'm trying to come up with something entertaining in the meantime. Any comments or thoughts? Juggle, oh God. No. Okay. I shouldn't have said what I said. Somebody else can come on and be entertaining. I don't plan to play my trombone for a while yet. Oh, goody. Okay.
Sorry, am I back?
Yes.
Sorry. Internet decided to break up there. I can't remember. I don't know exactly where I got booted off.
I think you said.
What was I saying?
Your connection's not so great, but I think you were saying figuring out where the Rust Foundation fits in to Rust's overall mission and so forth. That's the last thing I remember anyway.
Thanks, Nico. I've turned off my video just because the connection seems a bit dodgy.
Okay. I'll do the same. It may help.
So yeah, identifying the problems and gaps in our priorities is kind of key. You know, we don't want to invest in areas that actually need no help. We want to make sure that we're kind of shoring things up as and where things are necessary, and how that, you know, how that builds into achieving that narrative that I was talking about. Obviously, providing support is one of the big ones. We want to make sure that we are providing the right support to the community, to the project teams, to the working groups, and figuring out how we can do that best. And we also obviously have stakeholders and members. We're looking at, you know, prioritizing how we can support cooperation and collaboration to deliver what stakeholders need, but also to make sure that we're leveraging as much benefit as possible from the corporates that want to support Rust and the community. So those are kind of our key priorities. In terms of how that translates into work programs, I've kind of broken these down into three. So there's our infrastructure support. So obviously these are kind of big structural things, like negotiating and supplying the credit we need, the crates.io on call. We are working to identify what kind of ongoing human resource needs there are. So for instance, we're working with the infrastructure team at the moment to figure out potentially what kind of hire might be useful for them. There's also the cloud compute program, which is now kind of getting up and running. So the infrastructure support is trying to obviously shore up the kind of things that hopefully should just tick over and make life easier for everyone. There's also the explicit financial support. Now, obviously, the community grants program is something that we've talking about a lot. There's ongoing subscriptions. There's potentially specific fundraising for discrete pieces of work. We understand that the financial support is a huge thing, and it's something that some people are desperate for. We also understand, though, that actually just throwing money at things doesn't necessarily solve all problems. There are much bigger problems than just throwing money at things. So there's a big role for us to kind of identify where those gaps are and understand, okay, and we already know the community grant program is not going to solve everything, but what we do hope is that it will solve some things, and hopefully provide the people that do need it with time and resources to support their work. And thirdly, as I said, membership development is, I think, a really good thing for us to be doing. There's a lot of love for Rust out there. There's a lot of corporates, both big and small, that are really excited about Rust, and they really want to do something in the space, and they want to support the project and the foundation. Currently, they don't really know how, a lot of them, but they're very willing. So it's, I think, a priority for us over the next few months to try and figure out how we can harness all of that enthusiasm, potentially funding, potentially awesome in-kind donations and resources, to figure out how we can kind of diversify the benefits for the project, for the maintainers, for the community at large, and to ensure that, you know, we are also meeting the needs of our corporate members as well, you know, figuring out what their interests are as well, because as the foundation is a steward of the Rust programming language, we need to make sure that we understand the needs of everyone using it. So those are our kind of very key priorities and the work programs that we're focusing on at the moment over the next year or so. What I'd like to do by the end of the year is actually have a strategic plan that takes us through the next kind of 3 to 5 years. That is far more, you know, long-reaching and a far more detailed idea of where the project teams as well are going. In addition to that, I think what we'd really like to do is just kind of deepen the links between the foundation and the project and the community. We'd like to diversify a lot as well. One of the things that I've been hearing on some calls with some of the groups around the world is that you know, they'd really like to be involved, but they don't know how. So it'd be great to see, you know, an increase in diversity potentially in the teams or in the community at large. I think really underneath that, one of the bigger things that we have been doing is just trying to make sure that the foundation is a sound organization to provide a home for the kind of legal and financial aspects of Rust. I think a lot of people have thought we've not been moving quickly enough, or we haven't been doing anything, or we've been sitting on our laurels. I don't think that is the case. Since I came in sort of mid-November, the priority has kind of been internally organization building. So making sure that we have the right legal frameworks in place, that we are meeting our legal obligations, that we have the staff to actually manage some of these priorities and work programs, and making sure that, you know, we are financially accountable and meeting those kinds of obligations as well. So there's been quite a lot of things that's been going on in the background that are not terribly exciting to people, but that have been necessary to get the foundation in a position where we can actually do a lot of this work with confidence, and be a sustainable, well-run organization that is going to be around into the future to provide the kind of support that we want to. So, you know, that's been a lot of writing policies, talking to accountants, talking to lawyers, thinking about trademarks, all things that need to be done, but obviously of benefit to everyone. So I hope that within the next couple of months, the work that we've been putting in, you know, preparing the community grants program, the cloud compute, some of these other things these other irons that we've got in the fire, I hope that those will be a lot more publicly visible, so that people can actually now point to things and say, oh, that's what the foundation's doing. We're not just sitting in the background. So yeah, I think that's probably everything. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if people have comments, or if people don't want to talk up right now, if you want to email me or set up another call, happy to do all of those things.
So thank you very much, Beck, and thanks for the inside look. Also, I just enjoyed it, into kind of all the hard things that go into setting up an organization so that it actually runs, in addition to the flashy stuff. I want to open the floor if people have questions. Feel free to come on or post them in the chat. I know Beck will not be here for the social hour. She's got a conflict, but so this is a good time if you have something. And actually, to kick it off, I have one question. Suppose I'm a project team member. I work on Rust, and I have an idea of something I think the foundation should do. Who should I talk to about that? How would I kind of float that idea and get feedback on it?
Come talk to me, or Joel, Marcy, who is also on the call, I think. We are very, very happy to have a conversation about any ideas that people have, or anything that they think the foundation should be doing. I don't believe that we are all knowing, and there are many, many things that we don't know that would be great to do, but no one has suggested. So yeah, don't assume that if we're not doing something, it's because we think it's a terrible idea, or we don't want to do it. If you haven't suggested it to us, then we can't consider it. So definitely talk to us. I can't promise that we can do everything immediately, but certainly we're always happy to have a chat.
Great. So send you an email or something like that.
Sure. I mean, I know that's like super retro, but Discord, Discord goes so fast. If it disappeared from the main screen, then I've forgotten about it. So yeah, email is, I know, old school, but useful. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat from Remy, or LQD. He says, I have a question, or it says, thanks a lot for the update, and a question. Is there any news about the cloud compute program for contributors?
I believe it is practically up and running. Do you know, we have Joel, and he's in charge of this. So
yeah, I can answer that a little bit. So yeah, Modulo, one technical glitch right now, and maybe one procedural change we need to make as far as the terms of service. The program is ready to basically get started beta testing. Right now, we're focusing primarily on I guess the definition of contributors, maybe I want to make sure I understand. I assume you mean contributors outside the maintainer realm, like community members. But if that's the case, we're focusing primarily on maintainers to start, just because we need to make sure this thing is working right and actually structured correctly before we open it up very much, more broadly. But the goal is to open it wider once we, sort out all the, kinks in the program with the maintainers themselves. So hopefully that answers the question. Oh, yeah, you met maintainers then. Yes, we are about to launch it with the maintainers really, really quickly here. Just a couple of hurdles that we need to get over. So.
Remy says, great news.
Yeah.
I would encourage the folks who are typing in the chat, either Ryan or Jane or Nell, to come on and talk so that it's recorded.
Yeah, just what I wrote in chat is, in addition to talking to Beck and Joel, which of course are awesome resources, and feel free to reach out to them. If for whatever reason it makes more sense to talk to the project directors on the foundation board, we're also happy to talk. I listed out who those are, but that's me, Jane, Josh Stone, Tyler Mandry, and Mark Simulacrum. So feel free to reach out to us as well if that, for whatever reason, makes more sense.
Additionally, hi everyone, I'm Nell. A lot of you know me as the lead maintainer on This Week in Rust, and I'm also Microsoft's member director on the Rust Foundation board. Feel free to reach out to me anytime.
I was interested in back when you were talking about kind of connecting, members or potential members in terms of with the project. In terms of, I'm always interested to make sure that we're spending our energies well, that we're meeting people, meeting the needs of people who want to use Rust. And I think there's a lot of research that could be done there, sort of to make sure that we're better informed. So I'm wondering, is that the kind of thing you're thinking of, or have you thought much about that? How to kind of help bridge between project and corporations or people using Rust, either one, both?
It's something that we haven't got an answer to yet. We are definitely trying to think about it, and we're hopeful that. So we're inviting the corporate members to come to RustConf for a little session of their own, and hopefully they will stay. They will kind of meet people throughout the conference then. The other thing that we're thinking is, hopefully as time goes on, especially with the grants program and other potential work programs, those companies might be able to provide either resources, employment, or mentorship to people coming into the community as well. Obviously it depends on their own resources, but I think that there's lots of potential stuff I think we can do. We'd like to make sure that we're doing the right things, not just for them, but for you all, and the end users as well. So there's lots of ideas in the pot. If anyone has ideas, please come to us and let us know. We're open to anything. We just want to make sure that we're not asking too much of anyone on any side. But yeah, I think there's, as I said, there's so much enthusiasm from a lot of, and I mean, a lot of the companies are quite small as well, but there's a lot of enthusiasm there, and it would be foolish of us not to try and harness that in some way for the benefit of the wider community.
So Doc Jones asks, what is the decision process for approving a request like the one I described? I guess if somebody had an idea that they want to bring to the foundation.
I suppose it really depends how much money it's going to cost. Obviously I don't know what people have in mind here. We have the grants program opening next month. That's for things that have a cost, potentially, that are one-off or that are more of an individual sponsorship kind of situation. If it's something that is more of a kind of ongoing cost, things like subscriptions, like Zoom or like This Week in Rust, that, these are things that we kind of consider internally as part of our kind of budgeting process. We don't want to create a dependency where we might not be able to kind of continue supporting something. But yeah, any reasonable requests, certainly for relatively low cost things, we can decide that internally, and we get the advice of the project directors and the board as well. So in terms of, yeah, big ticket items, then that's kind of grant program territory, but relatively small things that are of very clear benefit, that we think, you know, are ongoing costs, that's more of a kind of conversation internally and with the board.
Okay. And Nell points out the foundation sponsors the hosting costs for this week in Rust. As of next week, I think I'll be using a foundation sponsored Zoom room for the CTCFT also. So those kind of things are already happening. Josh, you had a question.
Yeah, I was really interested in, earlier you mentioned the foundation has been spending a lot of time kind of getting legal structure in place, making sure all of the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, that type of thing. And I completely understand that a lot of that is more procedural, internal, not the kinds of things that merit a Rust Foundation blog post. For those of us who are interested in how the sausage is made and want to see what the foundation is working on, what would be the best way to follow along with the kind of infrastructure that's being put in place, the kind of processes that are being nailed down for things that are, you know, more boring than the average Rust Foundation blog post, but still potentially of interest to, hey, what's the project might want to know what the foundation is working on?
Sure. I totally get that. We are hopeful, well, not hopeful, we are going to put an awful lot more information onto the website. You may already have noticed a few changes on there, but we want to be a lot more transparent in terms of our policies, our processes, what money we're spending, those kinds of things. So as time goes on, you know, we are hopefully going to be publishing just a lot more of that information so that you can see it as and when you want to. Equally, I'm happy, you know, I'm very happy to write a blog post talking about these things. I just didn't think anyone would read it. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's coming up to the end of Q1 now. I'm going to be doing a performance report for the board anyway. I'm quite happy to tidy that up and put it into a blog post that links to a lot of this stuff. That's no problem at all. You know, if you want these kinds of things, I'm very happy to do them.
So two thoughts. First, I would love to see that. In general, the project has the structure of kind of a two-level blog where they have the general Rust blog that is of widespread interest and often gets reported in the press or the tech press or similar. And then the Inside Rust blog that is very much more, if you really want to know the details of how Rust is developed and how the sausage gets made. And that sometimes makes smaller scale tech press or Rust Reddit or similar, and it's a narrower audience. I think it would completely make sense to have a similar two-level structure for the foundation blog of things of widespread interest to the community and beyond versus things you're only really going to care about if you want to know the nitty-gritty details, but it would still be huge help for transparency for like, hey, what have you been up to? The other half of why I'm asking is this also, I think, helps the foundation and the project know what each other are doing, to the point of what if there is something going on where, you know, some way that the project does things makes life a little more difficult for the foundation, and the foundation spending time figuring out ways to put a structure in place to make that work when that may have been a historical accident of how we work. And hey, the easier solution may be, is there a way you could change this process and that would make it easier to work with? Hey, sure, let's talk about that. That's the kind of thing where working together rather than, you know, I absolutely love that you're doing all of that kind of work behind the scenes so that we don't have to. And also, if there are ways we can make your job easier, not just vice versa, let's find out and learn how to make those processes mesh more.
That's great. Thanks so much for that, Josh. It's useful to know that people are interested, and it's useful to know that we can come to you. I think one of the big things maybe that I didn't mention is that I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of the communication between the project teams and the foundation. At the moment, you know, we have I'm relying very much on the project directors, who are being fantastic at keeping us updated, but there's probably a better way. I'm just not sure what it is yet. So yeah, figuring out how we communicate better is definitely a big one that I'd like to crack.
Thank you so much. That completely answers my question.
Great. And we're at time, so I'm going to call this meeting. Thanks to everyone for attending, and thanks to Beck especially for coming and talking, and Joel and other foundation members. And I'm going to end the recording.